Okay, what are the anabolic steroids? Well, of course, the granddaddy of all the anabolic steroids is testosterone. Steroid, the structure you see there. You might remember from biochemistry, the synthetic pathway to testosterone begins with cholesterol, and cholesterol is synthesized from what? Where does cholesterol come from in the body? Outside of getting it exogenously. Biochemistry? Come on. I'm going to teach biochemistry all over again. Acetate, vinegar, I suppose you could say. Remember how acetate builds up? The body makes cholesterol from acetate, acetyl-CoA. You remember HMG-CoA, HMG-CoA reductase, statins, and all that? So cholesterol is made in the body, and cholesterol is a starting steroid to make the other steroidal hormones, including testosterone. Estrogens are made, progesterone, the corticosteroids all come from cholesterol. In the pathway you see here, one of the compounds is dehydroepiandrosterone, DHEA. We'll mention that later if we have time. And another one is androstenedione, andro, another compound that is subject to control. These are actually intermediates in the body's synthesis of testosterone. And here you see the conversion of androstenedione, andro, to estrogens. That's why, as a side effect of taking anabolic steroids, you do get some enhanced estrogen production. And, of course, testosterone by aromatase goes to estradiol. Okay. So what role do the androgens play? In females, they're necessary. Obviously not as much as they are in males, but there is some effect in females who are deprived of androgens. The female androgen insufficiency syndrome, which involves, as you see there, but in males, where of course androgens are responsible for the androgenic, the masculine effects characteristic of males, such as facial hair, muscle mass, genitalia, the voice, libido, behavior, I guess. These all are masculine effects due to testosterone. Well, actually, testosterone is not the active steroid. The active steroid is dihydrotestosterone. Now, sometimes you will hear on the radio, or at least I hear it on the radio, about this bad compound called DHT, responsible for male pattern baldness. They call it a bad compound. I mean, literally, they say it's bad for you. Well, yeah, I mean, if I had my choice, I'd rather have, not have the baldness to go with it. But it also is responsible for libido, for the sexual characteristics of males, which is part of the deal that goes along with it. So it's responsible not only sexual characteristics, but also the baldness patterns that we see in men. Well, there are actually approved uses. These are approved drugs that are used. As you see, these are the approved uses for androgens in both males and females. Number of them. these are a list of not approved uses for the androgenic anabolic steroids, which have been tried over the years. And at the bottom of the list, we have, of course, enhanced athletic performance. Now, obviously, the market for these is dictated far more by the last on that list than any of the other indications. And they do work. Anabolic androgenic steroids do work. The bottom one is a picture of me before what? But that's another story. It's been a tough life since that time. But weightlifters, bodybuilders have routinely used these drugs. In fact, I always tell the story of back in the mid-1970s. I was asked by a group of bodybuilders down in Dearborn to come speak to them. Went to the Henry Ford Library, I think it is, out on, I guess on Michigan Avenue, to speak to this group, and they thought, here comes the expert on anabolic steroids. And I thought, well, I'm the expert, I read what's in the textbooks, and so you'd be called an expert. I didn't know anything. I just told them what I read in the textbooks. And boy, did they teach me a few things. It was the first time I heard of the name Arnold Schwarzenegger. I remember one of the guys was saying he was on the cover of this bodybuilders magazine that one of the people had there. He said, this is, one of the big stars in the bodybuilding industry. This is before his movie days, much less his political days. And that was my introduction to the real world of anabolic steroids. And these guys were using them. They were admitting to using them. And they were admitting that their hero was people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. These things, I said, they do work. They do increase muscle mass. They do increase bone density. They can increase hemoglobin concentration, red blood cell levels. They are, if you take them, you can have at least you guys, can have bodies like that if you want.
I have a question, please.
Yeah.
So when they stop using these drugs, does they lose the muscle mass again, or?
That's a good question. Do they, when they use these, yeah, you'd expect that would happen. But oftentimes, I don't know that there's been any study about that. It's hard to do studies like that because the dangers of these drugs, they're not, there are consequences with these drugs. But I suppose theoretically you would say that when the drugs are gone, the effect is gone. But who knows what the real story would be. Yes?
Is it true that if you take anabolic steroids as a male, you'll have, and then you stop taking it, you'll have increased estrogen? So
Yeah.
to balance it out?
Well, yeah, you do have increased estrogen as a result because estrogens are made from testosterone. And that's why they ban anti-estrogens from competition, or even out of competition, for that very reason. Because, you have gynecomastia. These men grow breasts. Yeah. The anabolic steroids, there is a theoretical number that is applied to the anabolic steroids. Basically, the anabolic androgenic ratio, that you can separate out those effects of anabolism, that is building up muscle mass, versus the masculine effects like voice, libido, things like that. So if you take testosterone and its esters as the standard, you can see that some of them have, like stanozolol, Winstrol, has a anabolic androgenic ratio of approaching 20 at the highest, which means that it's it's much more anabolic than androgenic, much more apt to build up muscle mass. The one that seems to be favored among bodybuilders, weightlifters, is that nandrolone on the far right? Yeah. Well, how people use these is very subjective. Those who want to build up their muscle mass, there are terms like cycles. A lot of this is empirical. I'm not sure that's the right word, but a lot of this is hearsay. It's through personal experimentation. There's no science behind it. So some will say, we usually start with, let's say, a single oral dose, then they go up, ramp up the dose, and then ramp down the dose over a period of weeks. And they call that a cycle. So a lot of this is in conversation among themselves. Pyramiding, where you gradually increase the dose, and stacking, where you combine different steroids on top of one another, different routes of administration, all kinds of variations on this theme of using steroids. None of it based too much on science. I guess, Randy, you've probably talked with the students about this.
The UM stuff?
Yeah, the UM study.
We have a couple. We don't talk in great detail about it, but we've mentioned a couple.
Yeah, this is data that's updated every year. Surveys that are done, high school students, college students, etc. And see what the trends are. As you see, there's some peaking that occurred, when was that? In the 90s or 2000? I can't read that too well from here. Let's say. Okay. So this is based on survey data about trends in use of anabolic steroids. They also track trends in use of other drugs as well, not just steroids. This is probably the definitive study, the controlled study published in the New England Journal of Medicine in '96 that clearly shows the beneficial effects of using the anabolic steroids on strength, endurance. It's clearly effective.